Hey gunfighters, bonus episode, as in I already put out new content today, but I just heard about the pistol brace injunction. Happy with the government. Nice work. Something that should have been legal the whole time is now okay to use again. One of my favorite ARs is an AR pistol. I've run that thing for years. I've run it as a professional gunfighter to stop active shooters in this country. It wasn't my only, but it was one of my go-to guns when I was upping firepower from a pistol. Not always. Sometimes I would choose different weapons. But for a good P.D.W., that AR pistol became a tool that I would use to fight evil as the commander of a tactical team to stop active shooters. It was a regular. Also, when I was a professional big game hunter and guide, part of that was managing a ranch. Now, obviously, I shouldn't say obviously, but I didn't take the AR pistol when I was actually hunting or guiding. But when I was out riding fences, out doing ranch work, I did carry it a lot for taking care of coyotes, for just having more firepower on hand than a handgun. Kind of in that P.D.W. kind of role, but very practically as a ranch manager, out riding fences. You know, that wasn't the primary thing I was doing was shooting, but if I was out, you know, literally mending fences, doing some kind of hydraulic engineering that day, moving water around the ranch because something got flooded or something like that, and I wanted more firepower because I was out by myself, then that AR pistol was a common tool. So I think a very practical gun. They're not just for range toys. They're very, very practical. I'll be honest, when I first got that gun, I thought, I'll get it. I waited, actually, when they first came out, I thought, well, there's no way these are going to be okay. And then the ATF came out and said, no, these are totally okay. And I thought, okay, well, then I'll try them. If you say it's okay, they're ATF. We all know what happened with that later. But I got one kind of as a fun thing, just to try it out and get a lot of reps in, to save my really good, quote unquote, really good, what today is commonly called a recce rifle. But I had that rifle for a long time before that was ever a term, and I would save all the reps on that when I was going to the range and put the reps in on this AR pistol, up drills and things like that. But it actually is super reliable, a very good gun. And there's a couple of guns that get like that where I want to just run them to have more knowledge and be a well-rounded gunfighter, much like the M17 that I sometimes carry. And I just kind of fall in love with them. This is one of those guns. So I thought, in lieu of today being very topical, we talk about how to properly set up best practices for an AR pistol. Like a braced AR. That's what we're going to talk about. Practical, useful AR pistols. With that, this is Gunfighter Life. Welcome to the podcast where we talk about guns, gunfighting, tactics, the right way, with Almighty God at the center, Judeo-Christian values, and real-world first-hand experience. I am blessed to serve you today as host. Let's get down to the nitty-gritty of today's episode. The AR pistol. What I'm going to call anything shorter than a 16-inch barrel or a 14.5 pinned with a pistol brace. It's a braced pistol. Okay. Let's start with the elephant in the room. It's got a short barrel. Size does matter when it comes to rifle barrel length, when it comes to ballistics. Even with the same load out of the same box, right? The velocity that is printed on the box is an approximation, and it's usually pretty generous based on a fairly long barrel. You're not going to get the same velocity out of a 20-inch barrel as you will out of a 16 unless it's some weird anomaly. But for practical rifle cartridges, like a 5.56, practical rifle barrel lengths, let's say 24 inches and down, generally longer means you're going to gain velocity. The inverse of that means that shorter, you can deduce you're going to lose velocity. Sometimes quite a bit. A general rule of thumb is like 50 to 75 feet per second per inch, and that's not linear. You get to a point where you get shorter and shorter, and you really drastically start shedding velocity, like water off a duck's back. So you are going to lose performance, even with the same load. Let's say a real common load. I'm not telling you this should be your defensive go-to load or your hunting load or coyote load. I'm not saying that. I'm saying a very common load is XM193, 55 grain full metal jacket. You could take that same box, right, and you run it out of your 20-inch Marine Corps M16A4 20-inch barrel, and you run that out of your Army M4 or your AR pistol. You're going to get vastly different velocities. Even though the same velocity is printed on the box, right? Physics doesn't care what's printed on the box. Physics is not literate, right? It does not matter. It will be dependent on the barrel length. So understand that. Understand that it's not all a free lunch. You're giving up that size and bulk. You're also giving up velocity and, in general, terminal performance. We must understand this. Also, less concrete in nature, that ballistics performance, many rifle rounds, commonly for this we're probably talking 223, 5.56, many of them were designed for 20-inch or 16-inch or 14.5 pinned barrels. They are designed for those kind of velocities. Will they expand? Will they do anything other than a full metal jacket out of an AR pistol? That is a question mark. That is a question mark that is largely, I think, neglected in this world, because there are a lot of these AR pistols. There is at least one short-barreled load that I'm aware of. But other than that, will that really expensive round perform? Will it have that balance of expansion and penetration at those lower velocities? Question mark. That is a question mark. To put it in simple terms, if you look at the shedding of velocity, you probably already know that the longer distance you get away from the end of the muzzle, the more velocity is shed. So obviously, muzzle velocity is going to be high. The velocity is going to be lower at 300 or 400 yards. You might think of the AR pistol as starting out at like several hundred yards, and you'd have to do the ballistics data on your gun and your barrel length. But consider like you're already starting out at several hundred yards as far as ballistics go. That might be another way to look at it. And a hollow point or a soft point rifle bullet that's a really good bullet that'll perform well, at 25 yards, 50 yards, common CQB distances, may not expand at all at 300 or 400 yards. And you're kind of starting off at that point ballistically with the AR pistol. So that's a big thing to understand. It's not just a free lunch. Another big thing to understand in barrel length is reliability. In general, the M16, the 20-inch barrel, is going to be your most reliable. Now, all other things being equal, even though the M4 is more popular, the 20-inch rifle barrel with the rifle length gas system is in general more reliable. It will last longer. The gas ports in general, all other things being equal, there are exceptions, will run longer, smoother. I consider it like a diesel engine truck versus a gasoline engine truck. In general, right, you could get sideswiped at any time, have a catastrophic malfunction. But in general, a diesel truck is going to run longer, better, smoother than a gasoline truck, if you understand that analogy. It's kind of that way when you go into shorter systems. And it's not just the barrel length, it's also the gas system. If you're talking direct impingement. If you're talking piston, that's a whole nother thing. And I've done other shows on piston guns. If you're talking direct impingement, if you don't know, there is a hole drilled in the top of that barrel. There is a gas tube that redirects some of that gas pressure to push the bolt back. So you have a delayed locking when the pressure is really high, and when the pressure drops, that bolt will move back and forth. That was originally pioneered and had a lot of R&D in the rifle length gas system. It got shortened to the carbine length for the M4. And it was pretty well designed for the M4. Again, not as reliable as the M16, the full-length barrel, but still pretty reliable. When you get into the AR pistol realm, you start going outside of really tested and proven design parameters. Not that they can't be reliable, but you're kind of going into uncharted water. The carbine length gas system is pretty proven. The carbine length, if you don't know, is the length that's on the M4. It's pretty ubiquitous, especially now on a lot of M4s. I think the mid-length is better, but that's neither here nor there. The carbine length is pretty proven. In order to have the carbine length and then have a couple of inches beyond the gas port, I know this is technical, but I'm going to bring it in for a landing pretty soon, so stick with me. In order to have that carbine length, which is proven, and a few extra inches to have enough pressure for that system to work reliably, in my opinion, you're best served with an AR pistol in the 12.5, 11.5. I would say 11.5 to 12.5. That's your sweet spot. I think if you go shorter than that, you really get to a point of diminishing returns. You might have to go to a pistol length gas system, which is an issue. Because it could be an issue because it's not as proven, or don't have enough extra barrel to beyond the gas port for things to work reliably. Now, the Daniel Defense has a 10-point-something inch barrel. If you're going to spend the money on the Daniel Defense Mark 18, I think they've done the work to make that reliable. But in general, I would say the 11.5 to 12.5. The 10-point-somethings are okay, but you start getting much shorter than that, and I think you're giving up more than you gain. Also understand with the shorter barrel and the shorter, usually, depending on load, but all other things being equal, the shorter the worse it goes for muzzle blast, concussion, flash at night, and things like that. So just be aware of that. All that being said, a short, light, handy AR for a lot of things, for a P.D.W., for urban warfare, for a ranch rifle, for a lot of things is super practical. I just want you to be aware that there's no free lunch when you go to that shorter barrel. How to configure this weapon. Now, I'm a keep it simple kind of guy when it comes to fighting weapons. I'm not saying you could never put a scope or an LPVO on an AR pistol. If you have mission parameters for that, if it is your ranch rifle and you shoot a lot of prairie dogs, right, at a considerable distance, and you still want an AR pistol, right, prairie dogs are a pretty small target, especially when you're shooting like the upper torso and head area of a prairie dog. Magnification is nice just to be able to find those. I'm not saying there's never mission parameters where you wouldn't want magnification, but I'd say in general, for me, the most practical optic setup for an AR pistol is going to be a red dot or a prism sight. If it's a red dot, I like something that doesn't take batteries like a Trijicon, or something with solar backup like the Hollow Suns or some other companies, but something that has something more than just batteries. I don't like trusting my life to things with batteries. I also really, really like backup iron sights. If it's for any kind of martial application, backup iron sights. I like to run mine co-witness, a true co-witness. A couple of reasons for this, big advantages. If my batteries die, that's a big one, I can just run it with the iron sights. I can look right through the optic. Also, before a mission, I can check and make sure that everything is still good to go. Everything is still in alignment. If I have a true co-witness, I can put that dot right on the top of my front sight post and align it with the rear aperture, and everything should be line and plumb and straight and beautiful. If something is off, then I know. Probably the red dot could be one of my sights, but I know that something is not kosher. So I like a simple red dot, true co-witness, iron sights for backup. Prism sights also have some advantage, especially if you go with the non-magnified prism sight, because they have an etched reticle, which means even if there's no batteries, even year 25 into the zombie apocalypse or COVID-23 or whatever your vision is that, the world is drastically different than it is today and batteries aren't a thing anymore, it will still work. the prism sight will still work just fine because it has an etched reticle. Think of it kind of like a traditional scope, but without magnification. And I think those have a lot of merit on an AR pistol. And I know I buck the trend here, but I really like 20-round AR mags. In general, I like them for many reasons, but especially here in an AR pistol. A lot of rifle bags, a lot of gun bags, a lot of covert bags where you might be running this AR pistol as a truck gun or in a regular backpack. That's one of the big advantages of them. You can have them in a bag and it doesn't scream, I have a rifle. In general, you can't do that with a lot of bags with a 30-round mag, but a 20-round mag sticks out just about as far as the pistol grip does. So you're not really giving up anything as far as concealability. And I'll take a 20-round ready to rock and roll in the gun as opposed to a 30-round that I have to put in the gun to make it ready. Also, a 20-rounders I can run on my war belt and I can do a continuity of training. I can reload those, grab those, index them with my index finger, and insert them the same I would as a pistol mag. And I like continuity of training. I'll take 20 rounds right now over 30 rounds that I have to think about. That's just me. I know I buck the trend there. I'm not saying not to have 30-round mags. I have 30-round mags. In fact, I think the majority of my AR mags are, in fact, 30-round mags. But I really like the 20s, and the 20s are what generally live in the gun. In fact, I think all three of my setup ARs right now, and I'm not a gun collector. I have good, useful tools. And I have a few, by God's grace, good, useful ARs. I think they're all right now rocking 20-round mags in the gun. But if you were going to have this in a handy small package, I think a lot of times those 30-rounders kind of just make it ungainly, less maneuverable, unwieldy, and less concealable. So consider, I'm all about capacity. You should be able to own whatever size mag you want. You should be able to own a 500-round drum mag if you want. But for practicality purpose, I would say consider, especially in the AR pistol, the 20-round mags. PMag makes them, Amend 2 makes them, Lancer makes them. What's in the magazine is important. Again, many of these loads are going to be designed for that 16-inch barrel or even the 20-inch barrel. So be circumspect and consider when you're choosing ammo. Will this ammo work out of this barrel length? Will it perform the way that it's supposed to? I don't want to give out a lot of loads here, but I was blessed. I said I was a professional big game hunter and guide. You might imagine from that I got a lot of real world better than ballistics gel testing of different loads, and I know what expands out of my gun when fired by me in very good ballistics media. You really need to do your due diligence here because a much lower velocity, let's face it, 5.56 is not the greatest man stopper anyway. Certainly, again, you're shedding a lot of velocity going to a pistol length barrel. And on top of that, many of the loads are designed for rifle length barrels. So really, really do your due diligence here. I can't overstate that enough because a full metal jacket out of a pistol AR, you get to a point where you're like, does it really make sense anymore? So really, I'm not saying it doesn't. I'm saying they can be very useful, but you really should do your due diligence on the ammo selection. Other things to consider, simple. I like a simple 2-point sling and maybe even a 1-point sling. And I know people poo-poo the 1-point slings, but if it lives in a bag, like when I was a commander of a tactical team, most of the time it would be covert in a bag. If I grabbed it, and we might have to have it, we might work a 12-hour shift, right? So most of the time it was living in the bag. If something happened and I had to grab it, it was for an acute deal with me right now situation. In which case, a simple 1-point sling that I can throw over my body, mostly so somebody doesn't shoot me with my own gun, or I can let the rifle down to do a transition to a pistol, or I can just let it hang while I'm throwing on a tourniquet, hopefully not on me or one of my team, but hopefully not on anybody. But you get the idea. A simple 1-point sling for that is fine. If you're talking about running and gunning long periods of time with the gun out, a 2-point sling is, I think, far superior. And in general, I like a 2-point sling, but it's just a simple sling, right? I'll tell you how simple. When I rocked this gun literally as a professional gunfighter, commander of a tactical team, I had a piece of 550 cord as my sling. Yes, a piece of 550 cord. Why? Again, because it lived in a bag. When it was on me, it was in the bag. If I had to grab it, I just wanted that piece of 550 cord for the heretofore mentioned situations. I wasn't rucking long distances with this gun out of my bag. That's not how we operated. But a very simple sling, very simple furniture. Obviously the pistol brace, there's many different kinds, but a very simple lightweight pistol brace. Don't go crazy and add a bunch of stuff to this. One of the big advantages of this gun is it is light and handy. You start throwing a bunch of space gun junk on it, it's no longer light and handy. The simple pistol brace. I really like the Magpul forends, especially for this. There's a case to be made on a kind of do-it-all DMR rifle or recce rifle for a free-floated forend. But for a pistol brace, probably doesn't matter. If you want one, that's fine. But just the simple Magpul handguard replacements are fantastic. They're M-LOK. The only thing I would advise you put on there for this is a white light. Right? This is, especially if you're talking like short range, it's a truck gun, it's a P.D.W., it's urban warfare, room clearing type stuff, a white light. A simple, robust white light on that Magpul or something similar. I'm not married to Magpul, but just a simple carbine length forend with a light on it. I like what comes on a lot of these, just the regular old military iron sight front sight post. That can double for me as a front sight and also can stop me from shoving my hand out in front of that muzzle. Because if you're really used to running a rifle and you go to shove your hand out there and you do it really fast, you could blow your fingers off. Because on a regular rifle, you grab up there and you still have quite a long length of barrel protruding out past your hand. But on a pistol, an AR pistol, you may not. So I use that front sight post kind of as a hand stop. If you don't have a front sight post, if you're not rocking irons, you may want something else. Just a simple, and they make very simple, just protuberances. That's all it really is, right? An index point, so that you don't shove your hand too far forward on the handguard. That is a very minimalist and still very small lightweight modification if you don't have a front sight post. If you got the front sight post, you can just use it, or you might be able to use the flashlight depending on how it's configured. That way you don't shove your hand too far forward when you get excited. Like any AR, if it comes with a mil-spec trigger, the trigger's probably garbage. Get a good trigger. Any gun you're going to run, of all the upgrades, I would get a good trigger before I worried about an optic. That's how much. As long as it had iron sights, I would get a better trigger. That would be one of the first mods that I did to it on any AR, because the regular mil-spec trigger, it's garbage. You're actually in the military as I was and you're rocking like a 3-round burst, that's even worse. I'm not saying you can't do good work with it. I qualified expert in the Marine Corps with iron sights way back in the day. It's a old ratchety, looked like it had been drugged behind a deuce and a half for a couple of years, M16A2. You can do good work with a really bad trigger, but make it easy on yourself and get a decent trigger. And by decent, I don't mean crazy light. I don't mean ounces. I mean, and this is personal preference, but I like somewhere in the 3.5 pound range. I like a single stage flat, but that's personal preference, right? That's like brunettes or blondes or redheads. As long as they're Christian and they're your wife, I don't really care what style you like. But I like single stage flat. You might like curved double stage, right? I don't care. But a good serviceable trigger. I would not put a brake on it. I like brakes. I'm not the guy that says you should never run a brake on a tactical rifle. My in general go-to that has been for years and years and years, AR has a brake on it. And I've run it tactically. I like a brake. A brake does work. But for this, it's already obnoxiously loud. It's already kind of like a fire-breathing dragon. Let's not make it worse by putting a brake on it. Just a simple A2 flash hider is a good, simple solution. I'm not a big fan of cans of suppressors on these because the whole point of me running this is that it's short and light and handy. If I shove a big can on there, it's not short and light and handy. Plus, if it's 5.56, it's still supersonic, so it's still going to be loud. The juice isn't worth the squeeze. They do make a solution that I have used on these shorter barrels. Actually a registered SBR, but it's kind of the blow forward cans. They're not a suppressor, so they're not legally regulated. They don't make the gun quieter, but they make it quieter for you and louder to the person in front of the gun, which I don't care about because I'm shooting them or whatever. You get the point. But they make it quieter for you, the operator. You may look into those They do actually work, those blow forward sound devices, and they're not big and they're not heavy. So you may look at that. But just a simple A2 is a good compromise, and they're cheap, and they work. So, in summation, how to set up a good, practical urban combat P.D.W. truck gun ranch rifle. A really good, practical, short-barreled AR-15, legally a pistol with a brace on it. Starting from muzzle to buttstock. Probably not a break. A2 flash hider works fine. Some other device if you want it. Good backup iron sights. A good front sight post. The military front sight post works good. It also doubles. The benefit, it doubles as a hand stop. Simple hand guards that you can mount something on. I don't care if it's a rail design. I don't care if it's M-Lock. I don't care if it's outdated, obsolescent key mod. I don't care. Just a way to mount a white light. Once you mount it on there, I don't really care. But that, you probably want some section of rail to mount a white light. And I would have that on there even if you don't generally run the light. If it's a ranch rifle and you're only out during the day, I'd still have a way to do it in case you had to go out at night. But a way to mount a white light, I like rocking mine with a 20-round mag because it fits in most bags. It doesn't stick out any farther than the pistol grip, really. It's about the same as the pistol grip. A really good trigger. I like single stage flat, 3.5 pounds. You may like something else, but a better than spec trigger. A good red dot or prism sight with something more than just batteries. Don't trust your life to batteries. Something with at least solar backup or something that's tritium fiber optic or a prism sight, something like that if you're going to beat it around. If it's just a fun gun, then this is not a fun gun episode. This is a practical rifle episode or a practical pistol episode. I got no problem with just a regular charging handle. Get a buffer and a buffer tube and a weight. This is important. That's designed for the pistol. Not all buffer tubes are the same. Not all buffer weights are the same. This is an important and I think underappreciated and less understood part of an AR-15. Make sure the buffer tube assembly is meant to work with the pistol. And then your very simple pistol brace. And then whatever flavor of sling that you want. A simple 2-point sling is probably the most practical. Nothing wrong with the 1-point sling on these. I think of all the guns they make sense on, they probably make the most sense on this. If it's a simple truck gun PDW, you just want a sling so you don't get shot with your own gun, or so that you can sling it across your back and do some other kind of work, medical, something like that. But a simple sling, don't make it crazy. I like a true co-witness. And make sure that your ammo is going to work properly out of your gun when fired by you. Not, some YouTube personality says that Mark II 62 is the best. How does it perform out of your gun, your barrel length, when fired by you? Anyway, that's a good, practical, I think, weapon setup. Remember, it's a tool. You need to be a warrior to do warrior stuff. The tool is not going to run it. I don't care if you have the most expensive Daniel Defense Mark 18, which is a good weapons platform. You need to be able to run that weapon system. Anyway, with that, we'll start wrapping up. If you like this episode, if you appreciate it, consider becoming a patron. Consider supporting. Consider going to Venmo and dropping a few bucks. If you're just like, hey, I like this episode. I'm trying to piece together an AR pistol. And I wanted a good practical setup, and this really helped. This talked me out of some crazy amount of money I was going to spend, or this talked me out of something that was impractical. If you're dropping who knows how much money on accessories on Amazon, maybe hit the Venmo link and drop me a few bucks, right? This is what I do for a living. I'm humbled that you gave me some of your time. If you want to contribute, you see the value, maybe drop some money on Venmo if you don't want to become a patron. There should be a Venmo and a Patreon link in the show notes. With that, we'll start rolling into the tactical tip of the day. Many of these pistol braces have little, what I would call wings on them, meant to go over your arm. Let's be honest, almost nobody runs them like that. A lot of these braces have them, and a lot of them even have a strap that comes on there. Something you can do is take an extra 20 round, not a 30 round one. Another reason 20 rounds are awesome. But a 20 round or maybe even a 10 round magazine. You can a lot of times put that inside that pistol brace and wrap the strap around there. That way, especially if it's like a truck gun or a PDW in a bag, and you just grab it, you have 2 magazines ready to rock and roll. You already have extra ammo on the gun. Back in the GWAT, one of the early slings we had, because back in the early days we literally ran zip ties and 550 cord and the old web slings and whatever we could do to make a muzzle down tactical sling. Pretty early on, it's probably Iraqi Liberation 2.0, probably my second deployment, Black Hawk came out with these slings that carried an extra magazine on the stock. And that actually came in pretty handy. Especially when you were in garrison and you were literally just going to the bathroom, but you might get attacked and you needed a rifle and you had a way to have an extra magazine without needing all your kit. You can do a similar thing with the AR pistol with the built-in pistol brace. You can use that to hold a spare magazine on some designs. That's your tactical tip of the day. Your tactical verse of the day. This verse is coming at you from John 17. I do not pray that you should take them out of the world, but that you should keep them from the evil one. These are red letter words. These are the words of Christ. He doesn't pray that we be taken out of the world, but that we are protected from the evil ones. He's praying this for his disciples. We are in this world. Evil is a real thing. I didn't grow up a Christian. I grew up a heathen. But when I was a cop, I was a sworn peace officer, LAPD, and some other stuff. It was hard to deny the spiritual aspect of man, that there is real evil in the world. There is real spiritual evil in this world that manifests itself in physical evil. Evil is a real thing. There is evil in this world, and we are in this world. If you're in this world breathing air, God does not make mistakes. You are here for a purpose. Sometimes we have to deal with the evil. Obviously, that's a big reason for the podcast, to make godly men strong and strong men godly, make us more equipped to deal with evil. But you shouldn't just be able to deal with evil in a martial aspect. You need to be able to handle it in a spiritual aspect, because evil is a spiritual thing that manifests itself physically. You should be able to fight evil on all fronts with the power of God. With that, thanks for listening, and have a blessed day.